said I was in.
Okay, be quiet now. I'm connecting. Okay, I think I'm on, but doesn't look like anybody else is. 0 viewers. Usually there's a half a dozen at least to start. Oh no, here we go. Yeah, there's people on. Hello, welcome everybody. This is the Boxing Day stream. We're doing the animal realm today. Okay, so today is the third installment in a tour of the realms. We're doing the animal realm. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. The animal realm, or tirachana in Pali, which means literally horizontal going. The idea being that most animals on 4 feet, their spines are horizontal to the earth. The animal realm is considered to be the most varied realm, the most diverse realm in the cosmos, the most variation within it. It's also classed in general as a unfortunate rebirth, because most animals in nature, they live in a very precarious situation. They're always in quest of food, they're hungry, and also they're in danger. Other animals or humans are trying to catch them and eat them. So it's classed as an unfortunate rebirth in general. But as we see, it's the most varied. There are special cases within the animal realm that are more fortunate than others. And the example given in the Pali texts are well looked after royal horses and elephants. And I think in modern times we could extend that to pets like cats and dogs that are kept by humans and treated well, so that their existence is not miserable, as is the case of some animals. And also, even in the wild, certainly the top predators like lions and so on would have a more fortunate birth with less fear than other animals. The animal realm varies greatly in length of life and also in size. The Pali text list as the smallest possible animal is the young, or the larva of a bedbug. I think we could say in modern times there are even smaller microscopic animals that we know of. The largest animal in the Pali sources are the sea monsters, the makala, the great fish that can be hundreds of yojanas long and live in the ocean, and have been known to capsize ships. So, and there's of course everything in between. Animals are also considered unfortunate in that animals are not capable of liberation. They cannot attain to stream entry in animal existence. And this applies even to such animals as nagas and supanas. And I think I'm going to do a separate stream just on nagas and supanas, because that's quite an interesting topic. You know, the great lizards and the great birds. The nagas, for example, there are a couple of Jataka stories that feature nagas who are virtuous and seek to better themselves spiritually, but their aspiration is rebirth in the heaven world. They're not capable of attaining liberation in that life as an animal. Animals are called ahetuka, which means rootless, and this is an explanation of, for example, why they can't attain liberation. It's an Abhidhamma term. The roots, there are 3 good roots and 3 bad roots. The roots of greed, hatred, and delusion, and their opposites: non-greed, non-hate, and non-delusion. And these roots are not present in consciousness of an animal. So they're, and this also means another corollary of this is that animals are limited in the amount of kama that they can make. They're mostly driven by old kama, or as we would say, instinct, but they do have some measure of choice and ability, especially the higher animals. And there are stories that illustrate this. There's, for example, when the Buddha spent one rainy season in the forest to get away from the quarreling monks at Kosambi, he was attended by an elephant and a monkey. And because these animals looked after the Buddha for the length of the rainy season, when they passed on, they were reborn as they was in the heaven world. So they made karma in that way. There's also a story about, the story is found in the Visuddhimagga, of a frog that was reborn in the Deva realm, because when the Buddha was giving a discourse, this frog climbed out of a pond, and in his animal existence he couldn't understand what the Buddha was saying, but something in the sound of the voice of the Buddha inspired something in him, and he was fascinated by it. And there was one of the humans listening to the speech was leaning on a staff, and he shifted his position, and without seeing the frog, he put his staff down on the frog and crushed him and killed him. And the frog was instantly reborn in a palace in heaven. There's a curious story from Tibetan tradition about a dog chasing a pig around a stupa, and because they circumambulated the stupa, they were reborn in heaven. We also have opposite kind of stories. We have a story about a crow that stole some meat from a bhikkhu and was then stole it out of his bowl, and then was reborn as a peta on account of that. One of the collections in the canon is the Jataka stories, the stories of the Buddha's past lives, and very many of them concern animals. The Buddha was many of the Buddha's past lives were in animal form. Monkeys, elephants, many different kinds. The monkeys, the case of monkeys is interesting because there are three words in Pali for monkey. Makara, Kapi, and Wanara. And judging from the context of the stories, the word Wanara is probably a generic term for all monkeys, but the other two refer to specific kinds of monkeys. And we find whenever the Buddha, as the Bodhisattva, is reborn as a monkey, it's always a Kapi. And they're often, he's often in such an existence, a wise, courageous leader of the pack of monkeys. And they're shown as, honorable and wise and skillful, clever. The Makatas, the Bodhisattva is never reborn as a Makata, and they're always depicted as being silly and mischievous. I believe that the Makatas are probably meant to be Mak monkeys. Elephants are another interesting case because there are said to be 10 tribes of elephants, and the ordinary elephants that we would see would be the first ones, and then each of the 10 are graded, and they become increasingly magical. Each tribe of monkey is 10 times stronger than the previous elephant. Each tribe of elephant is 10 times stronger than the previous elephant, and the last two tribes are the Chidanta and Uposatha elephants, and they also have the ability to fly. These are found only in the Himavant, well removed to the north from human settlement. I mentioned the Makara, the giant fish. Those are enormous sea monsters that live in the ocean, and there's a few Jatakas that concern these Makatas, the sea monsters. There's a detail in the late Thai cosmological work, The Three Worlds According to King Rune, that at the end of the world, after the oceans dry up, it's the oily bodies of the sea monsters, when they dry out and become desiccated, the oiliness in their bodies is the fuel that starts the conflagration, the fire that burns up the whole earth. So it's possible for a human to fall to the animal existence and be reborn as an animal, and that can be a very unfortunate occurrence, because it's possible to be stuck there for a very long time. We have a number of stories about people who were reborn hundreds of times as an animal in sequence. So it seems like there may be a tendency for animals to be reborn back into the same form again and again. One example of this is Sariputta, the chief disciple of the Buddha, renowned for his wisdom. There's a story about him that they were out on alms round. The monks were out on alms round, and they came to a puddle of water, and all the other monks walked around the puddle in a decorous manner, but Sariputta put his feet together and hopped over the puddle. And one of the junior monks complained to the Buddha about it and said, Sariputta is acting up on alms round. And the Buddha said, no, don't think anything of it. It's an inherent tendency of his. And it's quite harmless. It's because he once spent 500 successive lifetimes as a monkey. And this story is sometimes told as an example of how even the liberation of an arahant doesn't eliminate personality or ingrained tendencies. What else to say about animals? We have the characters of different animals that show up in the Jatakas. The lions are always depicted as noble and courageous, and crows are often is another character that shows up often, and they're almost always shown as mischievous and get themselves into trouble by their greediness. There's a type of bird also that shows up in a few Jataka stories that is a goose, and they're depicted as very heroic kind of birds, and they're not. It seems like that's not what is meant. Is not the ordinary goose that you think of, like a barnyard goose, but there's a species of wild goose in India that is actually the highest flying bird in the world. In their migrations, they fly over the passes in the Himalaya mountains. So there's one Jataka story about one of these geese that tried to chase the sun, and of course he got burnt up. So it's very similar to the Greek legend about was it Daedalus that made himself wings and tried to fly up to the sun. The jackals are another species that shows up fairly often as being conniving and wicked, and often get themselves into jams and trouble. Sometimes they're paired as a point of comparison with lions in the stories, that the lion is shown as noble and the jackal as sneaky and wicked. Some of these stories have a humorous touch. There's one story about a jackal who came across the carcass of a dead elephant, and he tried biting into it from every direction, and the hide was too tough, and he finally went around back and started gnawing at the elephant's anus, and he made a big opening, and he crawled inside, and inside the carcass of the elephant, he thought, oh, this is a great place to live. There's lots of tender meat here, and it's safe and quiet. I think I'll just stay here. And as the elephant's corpse dried out and bloated, the opening at the rear closed, and he was trapped in there. Which was kind of a moral tale about being too greedy. So animals are considered in the Pali texts are pretty much what we mean by the animal kingdom today, which includes everything from very small animals like insects all the way up to birds and mammals. Humans are not classed as animals. They're a separate state of existence. in the Pali text, there's a theory of the 4 different kinds of birth. Beings can be either moisture-born, egg-born, womb-born, or spontaneously born. Moisture-born is the lowest form, and it's considered to be things like maggots that form in filth and rotten meat and so forth. There was a similar idea in Europe in the pre-modern times, that the idea that these kind of creatures that are found in rotten food and in filth are not reproduced, but from previous ones, but arise spontaneously out of the filth. Egg-born is obvious, is things like lizards and birds that lay an egg and it hatches. So sometimes they're called in Pali twice born, because they're born when the egg is laid and they're born when the egg hatches, which is also kind of a pun, because Brahmins are also called twice born, because they're considered to have a second birth when they're initiated. Womb-born are mammals, the animals that reproduce with live birth. And spontaneously born are beings like devas that are not sexually reproduced, but just appear fully formed. And it's said that in the animal realm, all 4 forms of birth are found. The spontaneously born refers to some of the higher nagas are spontaneously born. The rest are kind of self-evident. I'll say something as a kind of a sideline here about the theory of plants. Sometimes people wonder if plants have any kind of consciousness or not. According to the Abhidhamma, they do not. In the Abhidhamma, there are 22 faculties that are possessed by human beings, and 2 of them are the consciousness faculty and the light faculty. And plants are considered to be missing the consciousness faculty, but to have the light faculty. So they're alive, but they're not conscious. Now, there may be a partial exception to this in the case of trees. There's an uncertainty about the relationship between tree devas and trees. Generally, we see tree devas as beings that live in trees. They have dwellings, vimanas, in the tree trunks, in the tree branches. But there's a couple of stories that seem to imply that the deva is identified with the tree, at least to the extent of its life being bound or tied up with the tree. So if the tree is hurt, they are hurt, or if the tree is cut down, they die. This is ambiguous and it's not clear, but these are Jataka stories, which are much more or much less rigorous, theoretically rigorous, than the Abhidhamma. In the Abhidhamma, plants are not considered conscious. But all animals are. All animals from insects onwards have consciousness. They're sentient beings. At the lower the level of the animal, the less opportunity they have to make karma, to escape from their animal existence. But what can finally release any being from any realm is old karma. When we've all been in existence from beginningless time, we've experienced a multitude, probably an infinity of different forms, and there's old karma that might eventually surface and bring a being out of the lower realms. One caution that the Buddha gives is the danger of falling into the lower realms because it's so very difficult to escape. He said that once a being has fallen into the lower realm, to take birth again as a human, the chances are less than if there were a blind tortoise at the bottom of the ocean and once every 100 years he went up for a breath of air, and if there was somewhere in that ocean there was a yolk floating, and if they just by chance the tortoise put his head through the yolk, that would be like the odds of being reborn human. So now that you're human, I'm presuming, maybe I shouldn't assume too much, but I'm assuming my listeners are all human, then you've already won a tremendous lottery to have taken the human form. A very rare, precious thing. So that's about enough on the animal realm, and now I'll see if there's anything in the chat I can address. Let's see. Is it easier for animals to make merit than hell beings or petas? For the higher animals, yes, I would say so. For like mammals and birds. Ajahn, if one has a pet and we circumambulate a Buddha statue 3 times with our pet, does the animal make good karma too? That's such a good way to help an animal escape the animal realm. I personally would doubt that. It doesn't do any harm. It may even trigger something in the depth of the psyche of the animal if they hear chanting or participate in circumambulation, for example, like that frog that crawled out of the pond. It may have some unknowable effect, but they're not really making karma if you're carrying them around. They're not. It's not a volitional action on their part. Dear Ajahn, the modern man. I have to expand this. I can't see fonts very well. Dear Ajahn, the modern man has come up with a theory that logically tries to find out the why and how of biological machines and their roots, common behavioral traits, and so on. Is the yearn for survival. Is that why humans and other animals look and behave somewhat alike? But I cannot understand why devas and petas, or at least depicted. Should we, as devoted Buddhists, still accept maggots as moisture-born, knowing that flies lay tiny eggs? No, I mean we don't have to take the ancient biology. I mean, those texts were based on the best biological science of the day, which was actually, as I said, the same idea was current in Europe up until the 17th century. So it was a very common idea. And I'm not sure I understand your question about devas and petas. The most common trait for humans and animals is to yearn for survival. I cannot understand why devas and petas are at least depicted. I think there must be some more to that question I'm not seeing. If devas are supposed to be so intelligent, how come they never come up with any of the inventions humans have? I don't think they're. I can't see why they would particularly be interested in technology. They have, let's say, magical abilities. They have. If you want to call it technology, they have flying vimanas, which we don't have. The beings of the fifth heaven can create anything they like just with their minds. So I don't know why they would want to bother with mechanical devices. Question. I took DMT and saw a vivid reflection of myself resembling the god Brahma. This experience has lasting impression on me, and I can't help but think it reveals some deeper truth. There's no question there. Sadhu. Question. Ajahn Sona says that the sutras don't teach a separate vipassana and samatha, but distinction is found in Sarvastivada as well. How can one explain this? Now, if you're just going by the suttas alone, there's actually not very much in terms of explicit meditation instruction. And I think that this is probably, at least my feeling about it, is that the Buddha probably taught meditation on a much more personal, one-to-one level. He didn't give discourses on meditation technique. We find more of that in the commentaries, and particularly in the Suddhimagga, which is basically a meditation manual. And there is a distinction between samatha and vipassana. But yeah, I would concur with Ajahn Sona that it's not that distinction is not something that's clearly explicated in the actual canon in the suttas. This is somewhat tangential, but can you briefly elaborate on why the Buddha and early Sangha were not vegetarian? The idea is that the important point for the bhikkhus in terms of food is to be easy to look after, to not be particular or fussy, but to accept and eat what is given. So that if the people are eating meat and they offer to the monks, then the monks would be overly fussy if they were demanding a special diet. They are, however, required to refuse meat if the animal was killed specifically for them. And also there are 10 forbidden meats, and it's a curious list. I don't know if I'll remember them all, but it includes several kind of carnivorous animals like lions and tigers. It includes elephants and horses, and human flesh. The carnivorous animals are the commentary explains that they're banned because if you eat the flesh of a carnivorous animal, you'll give off their scent, and you might attract them when you're in the forest and come to danger. And horses and elephants were considered noble animals because they were associated with royalty, so that one would not eat them. Next question. From the Pali Canon, we know the Brahma gods can take physical form and appear on the earth. Has there been any attempt to analyze this chain of events objectively and all the major causes and conditions involved in the process, the way the Abhidhamma deals with conditioned phenomena? No, I don't think there's any real detailed explication of that. The explanation is given in a more general way, is that they assume a coarser form. That the Brahma's native form is subtle, which you can take it as being some people take it at least as being on a different frequency. That they're not. They don't have this coarse level of materiality, but they have the power to assume it if they wish temporarily in order to engage with the lower beings like devas or humans. What kind of action or karma could any animal make that would result in them becoming human? I would. I'm actually trying to think if there's any stories, but there are the stories that I've encountered in the canon about animals that make merit. They end up being reborn as dewas. I don't. I don't recall any animal being directly reborn as a human on account of some specific karma. I think in general it's old karma that comes to the surface. But I think we could maybe generalize and say that if an animal does an act of kindness to others, then that might result in a human birth. And there are cases in nature, for example, there's been several cases of humans who were saved by animals, like sailors that fall into the sea and are saved by dolphins. So it is possible for animals to demonstrate kindness to other beings. Let's see, next question. Bhikkhu Yuttadhamma said he agrees with Ajahn Chah. If you haven't achieved stream entry in 6 months of becoming a monk, then you probably haven't tried very hard. Do you agree with this? I think Ajahn Chah was probably trying to encourage his monks to work hard. I don't think we can put a time frame on it like that. There's so many variables, and not least of which is your past karma. Did Nagas go extinct? I don't know. I would not. I would think not. I don't. They're kind of supernatural beings. I don't think that they. I don't think they're extinct. But I don't know. No way of knowing. Okay. Now getting a clarification of the question here, but no, it's cut off again. I don't see that. Sorry. This is from number one. Everyone. All I see here is those were two separate questions. I'm sorry, the last part went like this, and then it's cut off. Okay, next question. Ajahn, this is not related to animals, but I was wondering what practice I can do to help with the fear of physical pain. Accidents happen all the time, like burning alive in a fire or in a car crash. So you're not talking about an actual physical pain, but a fear of potential pain. Well, that's being afraid of something that hasn't happened and may never happen. And there's no point to it. You're just kind of torturing yourself with possibilities. This is dukkha kukucha, worry and flurry. I mean, these things may happen, but they may not. Why should it cause you distress until it does happen? Next question. Do you have any views on the Bigfoot phenomena and where such beings may fit to the cosmology? I think they would probably, if they exist, they would probably be yakas. They pretty much follow along that description. How protective are the four Brahma Viharas for slipping into animal realm? Is it possible they can mitigate the karmic effects of unskillful actions such as taking intoxicants, etc.? Well, practicing the Brahma Viharas is in itself very, very powerfully good karma. There's no elimination of karma except by attaining to stream entry. But you can ameliorate or lessen the effects, or push the bad karma to the back of the queue by accumulating a lot of good karma. If you gain the mastery in the Brahma Viharas, the tendency is to be reborn into the Brahma world. Can you explain the concept of bhava? Bhava means becoming. Um, it's sort of like the active aspect of existence. You're coming into existence. So it has this aspect of existence, but also I would say probably a better word in English would be manifestation. That you're taking on some form. You're coming into existence, not just abstract, but as something, as a human or a deva or whatever. Would you say that the Turiya state mentioned in the Mandukya Upanishad, from my understanding, unbound, all-encompassing consciousness would be similar, equivalent to enlightenment? Possibly. I'm not. I have to say I'm not familiar with that concept. So it's hard to make a comparison. It does sound somewhat like the Buddhist description of an enlightened mind, which he describes as luminous, boundless, and without footing, or without a basis. When the Buddha says one who sees the Dhamma sees the Buddha, and one who sees the Buddha sees the Dhamma, is he subtly identifying with Nibbana here? I suppose that's one way of interpreting that. In general, you could say that the Buddha is the manifestation in physical form of the Dhamma. If pure mind, formless being, can make up a physical body if it wishes. No, you're mixing that up with Brahmas. Brahmas and formless beings are quite separate. Formless beings are never described as taking on a physical form. Could you explain a little bit of the meaning of animal consciousness being ahetuka or rootless? Well, the roots. If we take start with the idea of the roots, this is one of the qualities in Abhidhamma, that human beings are possessed of these roots, and they're like motivating factors for action, and you can develop the wholesome roots, or you can fall back into the unwholesome roots, and they become the kind of the root or the cause of comic action. You're acting out of an impulse of either non-harming or of harming, for example. Whereas the animals don't have these roots. They're acting by a kind of a brute instinct mostly. So when a lion takes down a deer for its food, it's not acting out of a root of aggression or a root of greed. It's just following its nature. So the impulses that lead to kama are much less. What kind of rebirth can I expect if I'm generous and don't kill, but other than that my moral conduct is far from perfect? Well, it depends how far from perfect you are. If you're generous and keep the precepts not necessarily perfectly but reasonably well, then the tendency will be to be reborn as a human or a deva. If you're chronically abusing the precepts, then that would have a tendency to give you a lower rebirth. If you have a mix, it might result in rebirth as a human, but in an unfortunate situation, being reborn into great poverty, or being reborn with a damaged body, for example. Is there a specific reason for a naga to show himself to a human being? You know, there are stories of nagas in the Jatakas and in the commentaries interacting with human beings, and it's sometimes the naga is one wishing to reward a human being or help a human being in some way. In other cases, they may be trying to take advantage of a human being. So they're kind of very mixed morally, but they don't. It's pretty rare. I mean, there's a few stories about nagas interacting with humans, but it's not common. There's one story about a naga who took ordination as a bhikkhu in human form. The other monks ordained him not knowing he was a naga, and then at night he turned back into his snake form and turned into this giant snake and terrified all the other bhikkhus. And then when the Buddha heard about it, he laid down the rule that we're not going to ordain non-human beings anymore. So we still have it down to modern times. In the ordination ceremony, one of the questions they ask you is, "Are you human?" Do predators generate bad karma by hunting, or is it not applicable to animals? I would say they generate very little karma for that, if any, because they're acting by instinct. They're just following their nature. I'm new to Buddhism. I'm curious how these ideas lead to respect, to need to take care of the environment. A lot of Buddhists have, both lay and monk, have spoken and written about that. There is various ways in which Buddhist ideas inculcate a respect for the environment. One is just the idea of non-harming. Another is contentment with little. But on a more kind of theoretical level, the idea that there is consciousness and life in all beings. That nature is not something. The wildlife and even the vegetation are not something that's exclusively for our use and enjoyment, but has its own existence. Okay, we'll get down to the end here. Let's take one or two more. There's a sutta that says when an arahant attains parinibbana, it is the end of bhava, but there are other suttas where it says there's samadhi where one is still recipient of none of the jhana, neither this world nor the next, yet still recipient of the end of bhava. How is it, well, still alive, you can be recipient of nibbana, while in parinibbana there are no aggregates. You are not recipient of it. I think again, I think you're the questioner who always comes up with these questions about nibbana. You're not going to be able to figure it out. It's not something that you can intellectually parse in that way and try and get logical explanations. When we have passages about nibbana and higher states of consciousness, they're approximations, they're attempts to explain the unexplainable. So just keep up with your practice, and maybe you'll find out for yourself one day. when a formless being, which is pure mind, is reborn in the form realms, it becomes mind-body. Where does the body come from? Well, the same as anybody else's body. The body is built up from mother and father. It originates with mother and father and is built up from rice and gruel. Okay, I'm going to call it there. I think that's enough for today. And next week I will do just stream just on Nagas and Supanas, that are the serpent beings and the giant birds that are their inveterate enemies. There's some quite colorful mythology surrounding these two. They're both situated within the animal realm, but very special case. So I'll thank you there, and I think that stream is working better now. Now I'm using OBS.